All right, I'm on hole number 4 of the Holiday Hills Tournament. I'm in Tuesday's qualifying round in the rookie division. Let's go to Golf Clash Notebook and check it out. Maybe. I think we're right here on Greenock Point. This is the one. So the way the wind is blowing in this tournament, I'm using the black line, and the way the wind is blowing is it's blowing like this. And my normal setup on this shot is 4 backspin and 2 left-hand side spin. And so in previous tournaments, though, I think the last tournament we were in, the wind was blowing in this direction. And so these numbers worked for the way I like to set my shots up. But the way the wind is blowing right now, and yesterday's qualifying round and the practice round, I had a 5.1, somewhere in the 5.0 wind, which isn't high. But what happens is when I put that backspin and side spin on, once I put that on, then I'm lining up my ball guide to go to the hole. And what I found was my orange ring or yellow ring was just right off. I was less than, I was around one, maybe a little smidgen of 1.5 rings off of this transitional surface. And I don't like being that close to transitional surfaces because it doesn't give you, in this situation, you hit a perfect, you're fine. You hit a great to the right, you're fine. You hit a great to the left, you take the risk of clipping this rough. And there's no reason with all the room that we have out here why we should have to be pushing up against a transitional surface to take the risk of clipping the rough here. So always leave, I'm a big fan of always leaving yourself enough room. So if things don't work out exactly like you'd planned, you're still going to end up here on the green. You make your putt and you go home. So I'm going to change my shot setup, and I'm going to I was bringing a navigator, but I'm going to switch this, or I'm going to make sure I use a quasar so that I can put more side spin on than the 2. So it's going to change my shot setup. So I'm going to move out just a little bit and put a little bit more side spin on it, maybe 3 side spin. And I may be able to stick with the 4 backspin and then try and guide myself up to the hole so that I'm a little bit farther away from this. And the reason I don't like to be close to this area right here, especially on this particular hole, if this was pure fair or pure rough out here, this sand didn't exist. If this was all rough, it wouldn't bother me too much. But with the sand, what happens is here's the fairway. Then you get into the little bit of rough, and then it drops into the sand and comes over out on the other side. So when you go to pull, the wind's blowing in this direction, and when you push it this way in order to adjust for the wind, when you get your ring set with a 5 wind, we're just on the edge of this. So when it drops down into the sand, it takes a jump and the rings start to get distorted. And so it's very easy to over adjust this and end up clipping that rough. And that to me is too close for comfort on a par 3. There's no reason to push myself that close to the edge. So I'm going to change my normal setup on this because of how the wind is blowing. I don't want to have to push up over onto the sand. So if you're playing in upper divisions and you're using the black line where you're having to adjust this wind, you're going to experience that, because if you're dealing with a 10-mile-an-hour wind, you're going to be way out here in the middle of the sand and your rings are going to be all distorted. So the ring adjustment, the wind adjustment's not going to be as true as it would be if you were just on flat ground, whether that ground be fairway, first cut of the rough, second cut of the rough, third cut of the rough. When you're pulling it over here, your rings are all nice and even the whole way through. But with this change in terrain on the sand, this is not, I'm going to move my ball out a little bit so I can give myself some breathing room. If you're playing in the upper divisions, this is why, the yellow line over here works really good. And you have lots of options over here. You may be shooting this with a driver, and a good driver to use on this would be a rock. You could bring a lower developed ball so that your red line's right in this area. And because we're getting almost a pure side wind, with the rock, you've got lots of options if you've got an upper developed one as far as backspin so that you can get over here. You can also use a Thor's hammer. You can use any of the drivers, but the ones that are preferable, like if you got a Thor's hammer 5, or you could use a rock on this. And this would be my preferred line if I was coming at it with a driver. I'm not a fan of the white line just because I don't like having to, I'm putting rough into play. Here I've got a shot straight at the green, but it is a technical shot depending on what you're using. But there's no reason on this for me to put the rough, the sand, the rough, and all of this stuff into play. So I'm going to set my shot up just a little bit different as far as how much side spin I'm putting on the ball so that I can give myself more breathing room on this side. I am going to do a 10% wind adjustment. I'm going to use a sniper, maybe. Did I spend so long there talking about that hole that I timed out the Golf Clash game? All right, let's go to bag. Let's pick out a sniper and a quasar. Give me a little bit of side spin. And I'm going to set this shot up a little bit different so that I have a little bit more breathing room. So I'm going to start off, I'm just going to add on 1 side spin. So I'm going to do 4 backspin and 3 side spin and see how much room that gives me. I'm not too concerned about timing out today. Today is all about trying to, yesterday was all about trying to pick the right driver and the right ball. And on these par 3s, I'm making a few little tweaks since we're driving the green. So from the front tees, if you're playing from the side that my opponent's at, you're not looking at any obstructions at all. And like where the wind's blowing right there at 3.8. 3.8 is not going to be a problem with the sand if I stay with my normal setup. But if we get into a round where that wind's up towards 5, then I'm having to deal with that sand, and I just don't want to do it. I don't want to have to, what I want to be worried about is whether or not I'm getting a hole-in-one, not taking any risk at all of clipping the rough. So I'm going to do 4 backspin and a full 3 side spin and see what kind of distance that gives me out here. So that gives me my 2, just that little bit, that gives me that 2 rings of separation I'm looking for. Pretty close to it. So it's 3.4. It's 1.0 per ring, and I'm going to add on 10%, so it's going to be 3.7. Trying to hit it perfect. Hit it great to the right. Speed was off just a little, but I'm going to change my notes, and I'm going to set that up with, I'm going to change that from 2 left-hand side spin to, and actually from where I was at right there, I'm going to change that to 3.5. And so I'll have to work the ball guide to get closer to the hole. But I am going to make that slight little change just to ensure that I don't get anything less than a birdie on this. I don't want to be clipping the rough and ending up in the rough like my opponent did. Those shots, especially if you've got upper developed clubs, there's no guarantees when you're playing golf, but they are a little easier than if you've got lower developed stuff. But there's no reason on these par 3s to have to take a recovery shot. The whole goal is to set it up so that you're up there, and in a worst case scenario, you have a putt like I just took, you get your birdie and you move on to the next hole. It's a draw. I will forfeit. Give back to the community. I think over the last 2.5 years, I've donated a couple million to the community in forfeits, spreading the wealth. All right, that was hole number 4 of the Holiday Hills tournament in the Tuesday qualifying round in the rookie division. Thanks for watching.